Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
Oh boy, already starting off to a good start, all right? Pressing the wrong buttons, stopping a recording that already started. Who knows what else is going to go wrong tonight, right? Okay. Well, anyway, welcome once again to another edition of Learn Photography with Duck. I am, as always, your host, Duck. And today, as you can see, it is Photoshop edition. And I was kind of hoping that a couple of the people that were here last week would be here tonight. Maybe they'll show up. Because one of the comments that I heard yet last week was, yeah, this is a little bit too much over my head, which is understandable. Sometimes it happens. You know, I have to balance a certain amount of my lessons, towards the more advanced people, as well as, try to cover the basics. So oftentimes, if I start getting a little bit too advanced for those of you who required the advanced lessons, the ones that are just stepping in may feel a little bit that like this is too much above them. So for this session, because we are delving into Photoshop today, I figured I'd go a little complex by keeping it super, super simple. All right, and what I mean by that is that I selected a couple of images that I'm going to edit pretty much just using curves adjustments. And pretty much that's it, nothing else. If you've listened to me in the past when I've talked about editing in Photoshop, you know that one of my favorite adjustments is the curves adjustment. And it's one of the tools that I really encourage people to get comfortable with because it has a lot of potential. Part of that potential, though, is also understanding how masks work. A lot of the tools that you use in Photoshop are used in conjunction with masks. That's what creates the local adjustments that target very specific areas of your image that you need to enhance, recolor, brighten, darken, whatever it is that you want to do. All right, so that's what we're going to do today. But before we do that, what I want to do is just mention that PPA or CTPPA is going to be hosting a photo walk, and they have the Seville Dam up in Barkhamsted on the schedule for this month. As you can see, February 22nd at 1:30. Now, a lot of people have said, well, I work during that time. I really can't get out. And so I put in a call to the organizer. I sent her an email, actually, and it says, hey, can we move the time forward? And I haven't gotten a response back. I tried calling her. She must be out of state. So I wasn't able to get confirmation. But what I'm looking to do is get the time moved up later in the evening, closer to sunset, because I've seen some sunset photos of the Seville Dam area, and they are just flat out gorgeous. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bare trees on the hillside, of the reservoir there. So they're not going to be the prettiest of pictures, I don't think. But, we can try to make the best of it anyway. And I think if we have that sunset light to work with, I think we can get some pretty pictures. So anyways, that's right now it's set for 1:30. But I am going to see if we can get that moved to a later time I looked it up. Sunset starts roughly around 8 o'clock. So I figure, if we get there 7:30 ish, you know, we're getting into the warmer weather, the longer days. So let's take advantage of it. Also, I mentioned the CTPPA is also hosting the 74th annual photography conference up in North Hartford, Winsted, some area up there. All right, it's open to anybody. Just go to the ctppa.com website, and under events, there is all the information about the conference. We got some good speakers coming in. We got vendors coming in. And of course, I'll be presenting alongside a couple of other members from CTPPA. And it's like 2 or 3 days, something like that. Anyway, all the information is on the website. Feel free to check it out. Okay. Let's see. Oh, Brian says, what? Sunset is closer to 5:30. Wait a minute. Did I look up the wrong thing? Okay. Let me double check. I'm glad somebody's double checking me. All right, hold on a second. Let's go to the photo ephemeris, photographers, ephemeris. All right, let's see, accept. Where is the sign in? They got the sign in the wrong area. Okay. Oh, you are right. You are right. See, I should have checked this site. Sunset is okay, so closer to 5:30. All right. So thank you, Brian, for letting me know. I appreciate that. I'll have to contact the organizer and let her know. All right. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that. All right. See, having a second set of eyes is always a good thing. All right. So last week we tackled a landscape shot and edited it in Lightroom. All right. Today I figure, I'll target some of you nature and wildlife photographers who like to take photos of, our local wildlife. And I have, let me go click over here. I selected, oops.
Hey, Doug,
Yes.
I want to interrupt as you said about, level of advancedness and leaving people in the dust and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as layers and masks are concerned, for the most part in Photoshop, I think I'm intermediate, but for some reason, whenever it comes to masks, I need more help. So,
Okay.
the thing about that, that as clear as you want to make it, we'll take it.
Okay. Well, I will. My plan for these images was basically to keep it as simple as possible. Okay. If you find that it's a little bit too simple for you, or if you find out, oh yeah, I already know this, let me know. All right, because I can get into a little bit more advanced. As a matter of fact, you know what? I'll Uh, I think I have another image. It's not a really great image, but I think I have another image that we can get a little bit more advanced with. Um, Give me a second. Let me see if I have it here. Um, it was, yeah, no, oh, I know where it is. Um, it's in, doo, doo, doo. Was it this one? No, this one. Yeah, this one right here. Okay. So, remind me, Derby Greenway 2015. All right. I think that'll do it. Okay. Attributes. But for now, I got these two images selected. All right. This parrot, this was taken in New York um, at the something but botanical gardens. I can't remember, or the zoo there. I can't remember exactly the name. And then I have this one, which was taken over in Derby at O'Sullivan's Island, which is part of the Greenway, the walk that kind of connects the whole valley area from Naugatuck all the way on down to Stratford, I believe. But anyway, it's a little blue heron that just kind of hiding in the woodlands here. And you can see there was absolutely no light getting into that area. And so what I want to do is I want to artificially light it. Okay. So we have this one here, because it's sitting, it's a little bird, parrot, kind of sitting under the cover of leaves. So again, really, no direct light hitting it. And you can see that it was midday. There was a lot of light, and you can see the little spots of light in the background, but nothing that was really hitting the bird. So we're going to artificially light this one too. Okay. All right. Now, previously, I've kind of, I tell people that I typically start my process in Lightroom. From Lightroom, I will export to Photoshop, do what I need to do in Photoshop, and then bring it back in to Lightroom. Okay. But there are some people that they haven't been using Lightroom at all. So what I want to do is give you the preview here, but I'm actually going to go ahead and open up those images straight from Lightroom. I'm sorry, straight from Photoshop, as if I don't have Lightroom. Okay. So for those of you who have an aversion to Lightroom, this is how we do it. All right. The first thing, of course, is you need to know where your image resides. Okay. Because, Photoshop is not a visual catalog like Lightroom is. All right. So we're going to go open. All right. We're going to go to My Photos. All right. And I put those into the miscellaneous classroom. Yeah, here we go. Where are they? No, let's make these a little bit bigger so I can see. There we go. Oh, there's another heron. Oh, that's the same heron, taken on a different day. Where are me pictures? Oh, here we go. This one and this one. All right. So What the hell? I just made a copy. I don't know why. This one and this one. Control click. All right, I have both of them selected. Control click. All right, so click, control, for you Mac people, it's option or command click. Yeah, command click. All right, and you can select multiple files. Okay, so we're gonna, and you can see right down here. Oh, I don't have my, let's get my zoom, my spotlight. There we go. You can see I have both files selected right down here. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and hit open. Now, when you open up a raw file straight from Photoshop, it's going to go and take you to the raw processor. And the raw processor is literally Lightroom. Okay. If you look down the side here, you'll see all the same sliders and everything that you would find in Lightroom, as well as all the functions. All right. The only thing is that it's laid out a little bit differently than in Lightroom. And of course, you don't have the other tabs like you don't have the library tab, you don't have the book tab, you don't have the map tab, none of those others, okay? Or I should say modules, okay? So if you look down at the bottom, you'll see that we do have a semblance of a film strip. Of course, it will only show you what you have selected and are looking to open. All right, so this allows you to tab between the two and make your adjustments just like you would in Lightroom. Okay, so as I've always explained, one of the first things I do with all my images is I normalize them. And by normalizing it means that I'm basically prepping it to do all my artistic edits. So what I want to do with the prep work is basically correct for any exposure errors. I want to maybe straighten horizon lines. If I'm doing anything with architecture, I may want to get rid of any keystoning. Things like that. So in this case, one of the first things I want to do is I want to see if I can find something that gives me a little bit more color. All right. If you notice right here, we have our profile set to Adobe Standard. So what I want to do is I'm going to click on that, and I have a small selection. These are all variations of Adobe color standards. And I'm going to basically, as I hover over each one of these, oh, it doesn't do the hover. Okay, never mind. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click through and I'm going to select the one that really punches up the colors the most. Because the way I'm looking at this particular image, it looks a little flat and not much color there. All right, so Adobe Landscape. Ooh, that one's like really brought out the yellows. Adobe Portrait. No, that's going back a little flat. Adobe Standard. That's where we started. Adobe Color. Yeah, brought it out. Not as strong as that landscape one. And Adobe Vivid. Oh, yeah. Okay, so those are the ones that are right off the bat. But right next to it, if you look, you're going to see a little icon. And if you hover over it, says Browse Profiles. There are additional profiles here. All right. And of course, you have your Adobe Raw, the ones that we just looked through. Adobe Color, Landscape, Neutral, Standard, okay? But we also have additional ones that come preloaded, all right? We have some artistic presets, feel free to go through, and again, these are also available in Lightroom. I've mentioned them in the past. I really haven't dwelled too much on them. But if you're not sure of how you want to start processing an image, this might be a good place to start and say, okay, you know, do any of these really strike my fancy? Okay. If you want to do something with black and white, here's a bunch of black and white variations. Just hover all over them and it'll give you a preview. Modern, ooh, that's a little too garish. Okay, that's kind of nice. All right. And the thing is that even though some of these may look a little bit harsh, just keep in mind that these are not the end of the road, but the beginning of the road. It's hopefully gives you some ideas, a place to start, but realize that if something is a little bit too strong, you can always dial it down. Okay. All right, let's see. And then vintage. Yeah. Oh, that one's kind of nice. Not a lot of contrast. Let's see if we can. Me personally, I like a little bit of contrast. All right. Oh, yeah. See, and here's the amount slider. All right. So you can modify the amount of that particular edit. Okay. All right, I'm gonna not go with anything crazy. I'm just gonna go back to the Adobe Raw. There's color. What was the other one that I liked? Portrait, color, portrait. I kind of like the color one because it really punches up those yellows in the green. Vivid's a little bit too harsh. All right, I kind of like that color one. So that's a good place to start, I think. Okay, and once you have something selected, oh wait, got to do my other one. We'll go with, let's see, color, standard. Yeah, I think I'll go with color in that one too. All right, so once we have that selected, okay, all right, let's cross fingers. Okay. All right. So where were we? Oh yeah. So what I was saying was, I'm looking just to get the image looking as best as I possibly can with all my global adjustments. So I'm looking at things like contrast, color. I want the colors kind of rendered in a way that's appealing to me and my eye. I'm going to set my white and black points. And where you set your black and white points is very heavily dependent on the type of image that you are working on. But typically, I don't want my black point to go all the way to pure white and all the way to pure black, just because, you know, there's no need for that. I want to be within a smaller dynamic range where we're rendering our shadows so we can see detail in the shadows where we need to. Likewise, we want to see detail in the highlights where we need to. All right, and of course, it's dependent on how you captured your original image as well. All right, so the parrot is looking pretty darn good. Obviously, we're going to need to work on it a little bit in order to bring the bird forward away from the background a little bit more. Okay, so let's go over to our Mr. Blue Heron here. Okay, this one is definitely going to require a lot more work simply because, one, he's just kind of peeking through from behind the rocks, and he's very small within our frame of view, and he's very much sitting in shadow right along with Alder Rock. Uh, um, this was taken pretty much at the opening of this little rivulet that feeds into a pond. And he kind of likes hanging out there, and there's a lot of overgrowth of trees above him. So that whole section of the brook is just in deep shadow. But he likes to hang out there, and I spotted him, and I put on my long lens, and I figure I'll take a couple of shots and see what happens, and that's what he came. That's how he came out. All right, so we got our color already set. We picked Adobe Color. Okay, I am going to warm. I am going to warm this up a little bit, not too much. And we'll play around with the exposure a little bit. Okay, so if you remember my analogy of the accordion, you got to keep in mind that the exposure is right in the center and is going to influence the shadows and blacks to one side and the highlights and whites to the other side. So you have to be careful. In this particular case, we have a lot of midtones and a lot of shadows, not too much as far as bright areas. We have some bright area up in this corner here, which I'm thinking, well, one, it doesn't really influence the overall look. All right. It does kind of pull our eye into that area because it is the brightest area. But because the bird is so small, I'm thinking I'm probably going to want to crop this in anyway, a little bit smaller, a little bit tighter. Considering that I do have the resolution to do so in this particular case. Okay, so that's my plan. So I'm not going to worry too much about that upper corner, but I want to see if maybe there's any way of pulling out some of the highlights. So if I bring my highlight sliders up, yeah, we're getting the white of the head to come forward a little bit. Okay. If we return that back, you can see that, you know, it's pretty much in midtones. Now we're pulling it outward into the brighter areas. All right. And if I go with the whites, it's just pulling way too much. You can see that it's creating this very heavy, unpleasant contrast. So we're going to not bother with the whites slider. All right. We'll bring that back to 0. All right. The shadows. Yeah, we'll open up the shadows a little bit. And the blacks. The black point, actually, I might even, yeah, the black point's not too bad. Okay, so here is where having an idea of how you want to progress forward helps in making certain decisions at this stage. So, as I'm looking at this, our subject is pretty much dead center. Okay, bam. And the head of the bird is nicely displayed against a darker background. So we have natural separation going on there. But if we look at the luminosity of this area and the luminosity of this area, and the reason I picked these two is because they frame our bird. They frame our bird. They both have about the same luminosity value. They're both the same value of darkness. in this particular case, the way I am imagining it is I like the way this is. This looks good to my eye, but this is a little bit too bright for what I'm looking to do. I want to see this go darker. All right, so that's what's in my head. Now, obviously, I can't do that here because if I manipulate my black point here to bring this down, I'm also bringing this down. Follow? So I cannot do anything with this slider here. I will have to take care of it as a local adjustment when I open it up. Okay, so with that understanding, the more important part of these two areas, all right, area number 1 and area number 2, this is the most important one because it's behind our subject. Part 2 is outside of our subject area. So I'd rather correct for where the subject is and take care of the area outside of it later on. All right, so hopefully that made sense. Okay. Likewise, we have, when we brighten up the head of the bird, we have a bright spot here and we have a bright spot there that we're going to have to take care of. All right, simply because this right here being adjacent to the bird, and one of the things that I tell people is you have to be careful with tangents. What are tangents? Tangents is where one object overlaps another in such a way that it kind of blurs the line between which one is foreground and which one is background. Now, tangents that play with optical illusion can be very, very funny. But oftentimes it can be very distracting. And in this case, it's kind of distracting because, let's see, it's kind of hard to determine where the bird is and where the rock is. All right, it almost looks like, the bird's flapping its wings out. So we have to create the separation of the two. So that's the problem with that area. This one here with the log, all right, remember I mentioned I might want to crop. And if I crop, we have a bright spot, all right, our eye comes in this way, travels across, all right, we're going to hit our subject, and then we have this bright line that just pulls the eye completely out of the frame. That's not what I want, so we need to address that as well. Okay, make sense? All right. Okay, so as far as my global adjustments, all right, I want to pay attention to the area behind the bird's head. All right, I want to open up those shadows. And not so much that the bird gets lost, but and then exposure wise, I think exposure about a third of a stop looks pretty good. Okay, I got the both birds looking the way I want. All right, so we just come down. Oops, I'm almost out of my frame here. There we go. And we're gonna go ahead and hit open. And a couple seconds, and we got, oh, what happened? File. It only opened one. Where's my other bird? Where is it? That's probably my fault. Open. Open. Okay. All right, there we go. So I got both of them loaded in. Let's work on Mr. Parrot first. All right, so what are the most obvious problems with Mr. Parrot or Miss Parrot? I don't know. I'm being gender specific, but I have no clue. All right, the parrot is obviously kind of a little lost in the background. So we have a bright spot here. We have lots of bright spots here, and we have bright spots here. All right, and of course, our eye wants to go to and explore these bright areas first. So obviously, that's not what I want to do. All right, I'm probably going to. I can probably crop in a little bit, but I don't want to crowd the bird too much. All right, it is kind of a little bit on the center. So if you want to play around with cropping, we can play around and see if anything really, strikes your fancy. Okay, now the thing with cropping in Lightroom is cropping tends to be a little bit more freeform in Lightroom. I'm sorry, in Photoshop than in Lightroom. Lightroom tends to have a lot of preset standard sizes. And typically by default, the aspect ratio tends to get locked to the aspect ratio of your camera. All right. With Photoshop, it's a little bit different. If you want aspect ratios, you can just come right to the top up here and click on where it says ratio, and then you have all the standard ratios. All right. So if I can go by 8:10, all right, and you can see it put it as the 8 tall. 8 across, 10 tall. If you want to switch it, just go right over here, click on that, and it will rotate it back around. Okay. Oh. All right. So we can play around with aspect ratios and see if, yeah, actually that doesn't look too bad. It gets rid of that corner, the bright spot. It gets rid of this bright spot, pushes this down a little bit lower. And well, that's the only one really, these two areas we have to deal with. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And let's go ahead and start editing. So now we have to make a decision. We can go a couple of ways. We can go with our subject brighter than our background, or we can go with our subject darker than our background. Ooh, that was a good one. It all depends on which way you envision this image. All right. And it can go either way because we do have bright areas in the background that we can, use to in our favor. But we also have a fairly dark background that will work. And then in that case, all we got to do is just bring the bird forward. All right. So does anybody have a preference? I kind of envision it with a darker background and a brighter bird. Anybody have a different opinion? No? Okay. We'll go with that.
I like the darker background.
Okay. Awesome. It's probably the easier of the two, to be honest. Okay. So all we need to do now is, as we're working, we have to keep in mind darker background, brighter foreground. or a brighter subject. Okay. Now, when we create a layer adjustment, and we're going to be working with curves, all right, we're going to go, I have my adjustments panel open up here. If you don't see your adjustment panel, you can go to Windows, Adjustments, and make sure that that is checked, okay? But you can also go all the way down to, in your Layers panel, if you go all the way down to the bottom, you're going to see, actually, let me go and zoom in. You're going to see this little icon that's kind of like a half black, half white circle. That will also give you the same things. If you click here, you have access to all your adjustments. Okay. I just find it easier to have the adjustments panel open because I can just click on a icon and it automatically launches into the layer adjustment. You can also go to layer, new, let's see, new adjustment layer, and then select from here. But I find that very awkward. Okay, so curves adjustment automatically preloads it, and it loads it with no masks. And what I mean by that is if you make an adjustment on the curve, it is going to affect the entire image. All right. And this is what I mean. You have to keep in mind what it is that you want to do, because as you're working with these, before you're going to be working on these mostly before you apply any kind of mask. So you have to keep in mind that you pay attention to what it is that you're trying to adjust. So in this case, I want to adjust my background. So because this is currently a global adjustment, it's also going to affect my bird. So we have to keep that in mind, that we just got to ignore the fact that it's modifying the bird and just pay attention to our background. All right, now if I grab it from the center and I move it up or down, it's going to adjust everything from our white point to our black point. Okay. But in this case, what I want to do is I want to see if I can lower the value of these white points. So if I click on the uppermost spot, little point there, that's our white point, we can take our white point and we can drop our white point down. So what this is doing is I'm telling Photoshop, all right, instead of 255 being my white point, I want my white point to be, in this case, 178, roughly. 178. Okay. So nothing's going to go brighter than 178 in this case. Okay. And it's going to adjust everything else linearly. All right. So everything that is in the brighter part of our histogram will get lowered a lot more drastically than anything in the shadow area. All right. So you can probably visualize that with this here, that diagonal line. All right, this diagonal line was our original. This is the new one. You can see the distance here is smaller than the distance here, right? Make sense? Okay. Doesn't matter. As long as what we're doing is we're visually looking at it and we're getting the results, okay? So the nice thing about this, so, is later on, as you add more layers, you can always come back to this and make little tweaks. So we may brighten up the bird and say, oh, you know what? Now that I've brightened up the bird, that background looks too dark or looks not dark enough, okay? We can always come back and revisit it, all right? So right about there. That looks good. Okay. And now what I want to do is I want to apply this just to the background. Is there an easy way to do this? Not really. Okay. Unfortunately, the selection AI for a lot of images tends to be a little wonky. Now I can go ahead and see if I can do a subject. Have the AI select my subject, but this is a little awkward because I also want to select some of the branches that the bird's sitting on. All right, so in this case, I'm probably just going to rely on just, the old-fashioned way. I'm going to go to a brush, nice soft round brush. I want to make sure that my opacity is at 100%, flow is at 100%, and I also want to, all right, our mask, all right, white shows everything. We want to make sure that our foreground color is now black, okay? So click on the little double arrow, or you can hit the letter X key. X will toggle back and forth. Make sure black is our foreground color, and also make sure that the mask is selected. You'll see the little white corners here, all right, rather than the effect. All right, this is the effect. Click here. That's the mask. Make sense? Okay. And in this case, I want this layer to affect the background. And if we look at it, it's definitely affecting the background, but it's also affecting our subject. So what do we got to do? We got to tell Photoshop, I don't want you to apply this effect to our subject. So using black as got my black selected as my foreground color, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start painting right on my bird. All right, and this is where having a tablet comes into play. All right, now the reason I'm selecting a soft round brush is because it's going to give me a very diffused edge when I paint. Okay, I'm just going to paint there for example. All right, you can see that there's no harsh line. All right, if I were to select a hard round brush, okay, you can see the difference in the edges of my hard brush at the bottom in comparison to a soft brush in the top. Soft brush will give you a lot more of a natural look. Okay, let me back that up. Okay, and what I want to do is, I forgot to change back. I'm just going to go ahead and paint on all the areas that I do not want to darken. All right, and you can use your bracket keys to make your brush bigger, make your brush smaller. You want to make the brush size in accordance to what it is that you're painting. All right, so in this case, let's see. In this case, I don't want to go all the way to the bottom of the branch. I'll let that kind of fade off. It's fading off as far as sharpness to blur. All right, so I'm going to follow along with that and fade it from light to dark. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're manipulating our light. Okay, now there's that branch in the background that's very bright. It got toned down. I'm happy with that. I don't think I want to tone it. I don't want to bring it back up. Okay. Same with this one here all the way at the bottom. I don't know if I want to bring that back up, but maybe this one a little bit. Okay. All right. So what I'm doing, all right. Oh, here, let me show you this. Oops. Switch back to my brush. if you find that you've painted outside of the area, all you got to do is switch your foreground and background color, the letter X on the keyboard, all right? And you can paint back where you made a mistake. So don't be afraid of, you know, oops, I made a mistake. Now what do I do? Just switch, all right? And anywhere that you may have made a mistake, all right, you're gonna go, let's see, Control 0. All right. So now what do we have? If I toggle this off and on, all right, we can see that we've darkened our background, but our bird is still the original exposure that I captured it in, all right? Which, it's okay, but it doesn't really pop, all right? Even if I brought the background down, it still doesn't pop. So let's make this bird pop. So this particular, all right, this one here, we're just going to rename background. I usually just go B, capital G for background. Okay. Going to make another adjustment layer, curves adjustment layer. And this time I am going to bring my exposure up. And we're going to bring it up to, so that bird really pops forward. Okay. And now I have a couple of choices. Okay. One, I can paint out the areas that I don't want. All right. So in this case, because I want this to apply to the bird, that would mean I would have to paint out all my background, which is a pain in the ass. Or I can do a shortcut and say, okay, if I invert my mask, okay, it's going to remove the effect and I can now paint in the areas on the bird that I want. So I can go ahead and at this point, just paint in the areas of the bird that I want. Okay, maybe we'll paint in, let's try that again, resize it down. Paint in, maybe I want to just target the top of that tree branch a little bit. Okay, not so much all of it, all right. Switch back to a black brush and we can remove some of that. All right, maybe add a little bit more here. And bring some of the tail forward. Okay. And now the eye is looking a little lost. All right, maybe I'll paint back some darkness. Oh, that doesn't look very good, does it? All right, X. Okay. All right, and then we can go back and we can say, okay, do we want to brighten up certain parts? All right. And okay, that's looking pretty good. And you go, wait a minute, Duck, what are you talking about? That looks pretty good. That looks like crap. Okay. All right, you don't be afraid to admit it. It looks like crap, right? Why does it look like crap? It's because we've lost some of the contrast, the local contrast in the bird, right? Because we brightened everything up. We've brightened not only the bright parts of the bird, but also the dark parts of the bird. All right. So by doing that, we don't have that punch anymore. All right. So how can we fix this? Well, one thing is, you know, we can start all over again and just very carefully paint in where we want, or we can see if there is a tool available to us to make it a little bit easier to control that local contrast. And fortunately, we have such a tool. All right, so Brian, you said you wanted to get into a little bit more advanced stuff.
Oh my God.
Here you go. Ready? All right. Down at the bottom, we have this little FX tool. Okay. And right at the top, it says blending options. Okay. You can click on that. Or what I normally like to do is this little blank area of our layer. All right. I usually double tap and it brings up this dialog box. Okay. If you've never seen this dialog box, I highly encourage you to play around with this because there's a lot of functionality and a lot of power in this one little dialog box by itself. Right here, we are in the default blending options, and you will see right here we have our blend mode is normal. This correlates with the blend mode that you can apply to your layer through this drop down here. All right, and these are blend modes. So for example, you've seen me do color applications where you use a soft blend to kind of blend the color into the existing image rather than being a flat color on top. Okay, so all of that is available here. Okay, and in this case, if you want, we can see if any of these blend modes all right, so work. All right, the first few, these are all darken. All right, one way to really look at this is you're gonna see these divider lines. This first divider, the top one says darken. Everything in that group is a darken group. The next one is a lighten. All of these will lighten. All right, so your layer, how it affects it underneath, it's going to lighten what's underneath. All right, and then we get into some specialty effects, okay? The more popular ones is the overlay and the soft light. Overlay and soft light, okay? So what we can do is as we hover over it, we can see that, oh, the overlay is doing something pretty nifty, okay? And the soft light is doing something pretty nifty. Hard light, that's a little bit more intense than overlay. We got vivid light, too much separation between the light and the dark. Linear light the same way. Pin light, that's just targeting the really light pixels. And then a hard mix, but that's just extreme contrast. All right, so it's going to be either between the hard light and the overlay. I think I'll go with the hard light, but here's the thing we can do. All right, hit OK. We can come back to our adjustment and we can adjust that accordingly. All right, and we can also add additional points on our curve and play around to see what it does. So maybe we want to bring up the areas in shadow a little bit more. All right. Any questions about this? Okay, this is pretty advanced when it starts getting into blend modes. Okay, all right. I mentioned blend modes. I really encourage you to take a look and experiment with blend modes. It took me forever to figure out how blend modes work. It's not an easy task. Okay, you're not going to get it in a couple of sessions. We're not going to delve on it here. As a matter of fact, I'm going to get rid of that and go back to normal. I'm going to show you a slightly easier process that might be better for you. So let me bring this back and bring our highlights up. Okay. All right, we're gonna go back and I'm gonna double tap and brings up my dialog box. Okay. And this time, what I want to pay attention to is this part that says blend if. Blend if. All right. And there are two
Wait.
sliders.
We lost you.
You lost me?
Yeah. Now.
Yes. Am I back?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Let's see. We'll try it this way. These two right here. Okay. Blend if is another one of the tools that once you learn the power of blend if, especially how you can use it with your adjustment layers, will open up a whole new world of editing for you. It's like magic in a bottle. Okay. But it does take a while to get used to. All right. Not as complex as blend modes. All right. And it's obviously doing something a little bit different than blend modes, but it's a little bit easier to kind of wrap your brain around. Okay. So what do we have here? We have two sliders. This slider is labeled current layer. So what is our current layer? All right. Oops, let me move this out of the way. Our current layer is our adjustment layer. All right. The adjustment layer that is making everything brighter. Okay. So keep that in mind. All right. This is our current layer. All right. Which is our levels. All right. And then we have this slider, which is the underlying layer. Okay. And underlying is anything below the current layer. Okay. So in this case, the underlying layer, we have a levels adjustment that's making our background darker, and we have the image itself. Okay. So what this means is the top slider is going to take whatever pixel information is in that current layer, and it's going to say, I want to manipulate this in relation to everything below it. Okay? But here's the problem. There's no pixel information in our current layer. It's an adjustment layer. Okay? So that kind of negates that one. Makes it a little bit easier. We don't need to worry about this one. We now need to worry about this one. All right? So how does this work? If you notice, we have darks over here and whites over here, right? Oh. Okay. We have the full range from 0 to 255. All right. And it works just like the histogram, just like anything else, where the value here is anything that is bright on our image. Okay, we have these bright spots. They'll be somewhere up in here. Okay, all our shadows will be somewhere in here, right?
Oh, we can see you.
Did I freeze again?
No image. I don't know.
You should be seeing my desktop.
No, nothing.
Really? Oh, that's bizarre. How about now?
Yes.
Oh, I wonder. Am I gone now?
Gone.
Oh. You know what? My little annotating tool is
Now
Wow.
you're back.
My annotating tool is really, really messing it up. That's wild. That's wild. Okay. How about, oh, see, that doesn't bother it. Okay. And this, that doesn't bother. Oh, yeah. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
You can? Okay. And you can see the spotlight? I'm putting a
Oh,
spotlight over the screen. Oh, that's weird. Okay. All right. I will
yeah.
okay. So I'll try to just use this then. All right. The dark pixels are represented by this part of the slider, and all the light pixels in the image are by this part of the slider, right? Okay, and you can
Mhm.
see that we have a little slider bar on the whites, a little slider bar on the blacks.
Mhm.
All right, so this is where it gets tricky, and try to wrap your head around this, okay? These little points, the black point and the white point on the underlying layer, signify the parts of the image that you want to protect from being influenced by your adjustment. Okay, so what's our adjustment? Our adjustment is a levels adjustment that wants to make everything brighter. Okay,
Mhm.
and because we have a mask, it's only on the bird and a little bit of the twig, correct?
Mhm.
All right, so we're not going to pay attention to anything in the background. It's just for the bird and the twig. All right, so on the bird, we have areas of brightness around the eye, the yellow parts of the chartreuse green, yellow green of the wings. Okay,
Mhm.
the brightest parts is what we want to keep with our layers adjustment. And we want to remove that effect from the darker parts of the bird. So the edges of the feathers where there's a little bit of darkness, right? The crown, the beak, parts of the wings, okay? We don't want the effect on those areas. Those are the areas that we want to protect. So we're going to take the underlying layer, this slider here,
Mhm.
and we're going to bring it over. All right. And as I bring it over, you can see that all of a sudden we have the original exposure coming back. All right. So in other words, it's peeking through and it's going to look ugly. All right.
Mhm.
But you're seeing it, what it's doing is it's preserving those darker pixels from being affected by the layer adjustment. Do you
Mhm.
do you get that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what we want to do is we want to manipulate this slider so that we just are applying the brightness just to the bright areas of the bird. So I definitely want, that green around the head. We want that yellow green around the wings, all right, and some of it on the lower part. Definitely along the top of the twigs, okay? All right, so where do we stop? That's entirely up to you. But again, the nice thing is you can always change your mind later, okay? All right, so we're going to right about there. Now, obviously, if we look at it, it's very pixelated and looks gross. We can't keep it there. All right. But if we press the Alt key, Option key for you Mac people, press the Alt key, we can separate that point into two halves. Okay? And what this does is it gives us a transition, all right, from 100% to 0. All right, so remember earlier I showed you the difference between a soft brush and a hard brush? The soft brush was because there was a soft transition that feathered off from the full effect of the brush to no effect. All right, so we have the same transition available here from full effect to no effect. And the wider we make that, the softer that transition becomes. All right, so now what we're doing is we are preserving the shadows and just applying that effect to the brighter parts. Okay, so we are preserving the original underlying content and everything from this point to 0, 100% black. All right, from this point here, all right, which is what are about 97. Okay, numbers, you can go by the numbers if you want, but just realize that that's a dark shadows to black is being preserved from the underlying layer. All right, the only pixels that are being allowed to be affected by this brightening is from 255 to 97. All right, so all these bright pixels of our underlying layer is being affected. Okay, make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And of course, this is salt and pepper to taste. All right, how much contrast you want. That looks pretty good. I'm going to hit OK. And of course, you can always come back and say, okay, I want maybe a little less brightening in certain areas. Okay. All right. So this is before, this is after. Before, after. Okay. All right. Any questions on this so far? All right. I'm going to go ahead and select these two layers. All right. Click on the first, shift click on the second, Control G to group it. This is our before image. This is our after. All right. And hopefully you can say that is definitely a much better image in just two layers. I can't make this any easier.
Yeah.
I can't. One layer darkened the image, the other layer brightened the image. All right. And you select what you want to brighten, what you want to darken. Okay. Any questions on this? We're good? All right. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at this guy. Okay. This guy, pretty much the same thing. Obviously, we want to crop in. I'm going to go with the rule of thirds, place them right there in that rule of thirds. I don't need all that water down below. I definitely don't need that very bright spot over in the corner. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up. All right. So if you recall, all right, actually here, I'll do it like that. Oops. Let me do a new layer. Let me do a hard round. Let me pick yellow. Yeah, let me pick that gross fluorescent or pink. Okay, good. All right. If you remember, this area here needs to be toned down so that it's not competing with the bird. Okay. Well, actually, it can go one of two ways. We could either make it brighter than our bird or darker than our bird. All right. In this case, I think darker will probably be in our favor, simply because the entire scene is fairly dark to begin with. All right. I might also want to balance it out a little bit by bringing the luminosity up on the surface of this rock. Okay, because now we have to start thinking like an artist here. We're taking a scene that has no light whatsoever, and we want to paint the light in. So we have to now start saying, okay, where do I want to paint my light into that makes sense? All right, so we notice, actually, let me go ahead and undo that. We notice that we have our light source that's coming in from here. All right, and the way we can tell is because right there in that upper corner, that's our brightest part of our image. Okay, we can see that's where the sun's coming in. So if it's hitting this rock, it would also make sense that it would hit the top of this rock. All right, and actually it is, because you can see that the underlying part here is in shadow the same way as all of this is in shadow. It's just that this is a lot darker than that, probably because of the material that the rock is made out of. So we can take some creative liberty and raise the exposure on that to match our rock. But we're going to lower the exposure that. So if we lower, here, let me go delete. If we lower this and raise that, hopefully we'll find that happy medium that works with everything. Okay. The other issue was this, which leads our eye off. We want to return our eye this way, so we're going to darken this up. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right. What else? And yeah, probably just add a little bit more light to the bird. We have a lot of specularity bouncing off the water here. Now, I could have cropped the water completely out, but it's a water bird. It's part of its habitat, so I want to show the bird in its habitat. So I didn't want to completely remove the water, all right? But it's very reflective. It's reflecting all that light that's coming in from above. So I want to tone that down. Okay? So that's our plan. Okay? That's our plan. Okay. How do we do this? All right. We've already said that our background behind the bird is looking really, really good to begin with. Okay. All right. So I'm thinking from literally mid-frame over, we want to darken it down. All right. So let's get a curves adjustment. All right. And we're going to, all right. This is where pre-visualization comes into play. Remember earlier, the previous image, I said just concentrate on the background. All right? We're upping it up a little bit now because we're only going to affect part of our background. So you need to keep in mind this area. I should probably keep my annotation layer here. I want to preserve the luminosity here.
Mm-hmm.
Everything above it, I want to bring down. All right, so I'm going to make a global adjustment, but I want to keep in my mind local adjustment. All right, so I have to remember this as I manipulate everything else. Okay, all right. So as I bring this down, you notice that the center is being darkened as well. All right, so I have to keep in mind how dark was that. And you don't have to be precise because you can always fine tune it, okay? But right about there matches what was in the center previously. So I'm going to go with that. That's good. All right. Come back to my mask right here. Again, make sure that your mask is selected. And I'm going to invert it. Command I inverts it. That's the quickest way to do it. I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way here for a second. Soft brown brush. I'm going to make it nice and large. Black is my foreground color currently. Black is my mask. Obviously, that's not going to work. So what I got to do, I got to invert my colors, make white my foreground color. Letter X on the keyboard inverts that. Let me move this back. And I'm just going to paint up in all these areas that are dark. Are light. Okay. And of course, you can make your brush size according. All right. And let me attack that water just because. Okay. All right. If I press and hold the Alt key, Option key for you Mac people, and I click on my mask, it's going to show me my current mask. So you can see it's not precise by any way, shape, form, or another. Not at all. But you'll notice that we have nice soft transitions between the white and the black, and that's what makes the difference here. Click on my adjustment layer, and you can see that now we've taken that background that was very, very bright, and we've knocked it down to a decent luminosity that kind of sort of matches that background. Okay, makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right, now, of course, you can always adjust that as needed. You can make it darker, you can make it brighter, whatever. Okay, I don't want to make it too dark. I just don't want it pulling my eye away from the subject. All right. Okay. All right. And I'll rename that, double click, rename that BG for background. All right. Another adjustment layer. All right. And mind you, I'm not really doing these in any particular order right now. All right. There will be times where the arrangement of layers matters. In this case, it really doesn't, because all these layers, all they're doing is they're modifying the exposure levels in different parts of the image. We're not doing anything that affects colors. And that's when you really have to start worrying about layer order. All right. So right now, no particular order. Okay. So let's tackle the top part of this rock. Or actually, let's tackle the top part of the rock behind it. All right. I want to knock that down a little bit. Okay. And in this case, you know what? I'm going to bring my white point down, because what I want to do is, all right, let me bring that back up. The reason I went with white point rather than grabbing it in the middle, all right, is that the rock itself has a lot of midtones already. You agree with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There are a few little spots that are brighter than that midtone. Okay. If I were to grab the midtone part of our curves adjustment and bring it down, you'll notice that what it's doing is it's adding contrast by darkening the midtones a lot more. Okay. Again, you can see that the distance from that central diagonal line here is a lot wider than here. Okay, so that means it's affecting the brighter parts, the brighter pixels, a lot less than the midtones. So we've really taken the midtones and we dragged it down and we darkened it a lot. But the bright parts didn't get dragged down by very much. So what that does is it creates contrast. That's not what I want. I want everything to come down pretty much linearly. All right. So I'm going to get rid of that point. And I'm just going to take my white point and I'm going to drop it down. So basically I'm telling Photoshop that instead of white being 255, I want white to be, in this case, about 192. All right, around 190, and then everything below that is going to get darkened appropriately. Okay. All right. So now we've darkened everything. We want to affect just what? Just the top of the rock. So I'm going to go ahead and invert, Control Command I. Okay. Select a nice soft brush. Make it size appropriate. Make sure white is my foreground color, or if it isn't. Oh, if you have, here, I'll pick a different color. If you have a different color, all right, and you want to return back to the default, just hit the letter D or hit this little black and white section up here. That will return it back to the default, all right, or the letter D. All right, white as my foreground color. I'm going to paint in, and in this case, yeah, I'll paint in those leaves as well. All right, and you know what? I'll paint this corner up a little bit. Okay. So I've taken the top of that rock, all right, and reduced the luminosity on it, all right? And of course, you can adjust it accordingly. I want it to kind of match this rock down at the bottom, all right? So it looks like we got a little bit of light hitting it, all right? I might change that later, I don't know, okay? But for now, this is where I'm gonna go. All right, everybody sees how you have to keep certain things in perspective when you make adjustments. All right. Okay. All right. Another one. In this case, what I want to do is I want to brighten up my bird. All right. In this case, I don't want, let me remove it. I don't want to brighten the bright parts of the bird too much, because what's going to happen is going to get blown out. Okay. But the body, and in particular, what I'm noticing is the neck of the bird is a little bit too dark for me. I want that to pop forward. Okay. So all that is in midtones along with the body. All of that is in midtones. Okay, so in this case, I'm not going to grab my white point because that's just going to blow everything out. Okay, I'm going to grab it by the midpoint and bring it out. And it's going to keep my white point safe. Okay, and it probably doesn't need too much. There we go. Again, invert my mask, Control I. Pick a nice soft brown brush. Excuse me. Gotta get a drink. All right. Size my brush down accordingly. And I'm just going to paint on the neck and probably the top of the bird here. Okay. Maybe the orange part of the beak. Let's see if we can bring some of that out a little bit. All right. I don't want to do the top of the head because that's already dark. Okay. But, all right. What makes contrast? The distance in value between dark and light. The more distance, the bigger the contrast. So if we have black and white against each other, you're going to have a the strongest contrast you can have. Okay? Where it gets tricky is when you start getting into the midtones. All right? So here we have midtones of the body and midtones of the wing. If they're both in the same value, it's all going to kind of mesh together. All right, so what I did here in this case is I added a little bit of separation of the wing by brightening the top part of the bird's body. All right, so if we go before and after, all right, so that just makes it pop out a little bit more. All right, and the reason I did that is because we're seeing just a part of the bird. All right, just a part of the bird. I want that bird to kind of stand out. Okay, and not only is it competing against itself in this case, because you notice that I also brightened up the neck. Okay, not only is it competing with the midtones of the neck, the back, and the wing, but we're also competing with midtones of the rock. All right, which we addressed a little bit, and going into the shadows on the side of the rock. So I might want to increase the contrast here. Okay, increase the contrast. Oh. Let me get a nice round. Let me make my brush smaller. Okay, the contrast right along this edge. All right, so I want to lower this. All right, which by effect, all right, even though I'm not actually raising the luminosity of the bird, by lowering it darker, it automatically makes that look brighter. Make sense? All right. So what that's going to do is it's going to increase the contrast between this side and the bird. Okay. All right. So let me back that out. Okay. All right. So one we can do is, oh, actually, you know what? Let me rename this because we have a mask already for our rock, right? All right, let me rename that rock, and I'll go left. All right, to differentiate from the rock on the right. All right, so I can go back to the mask. All right, nice round soft brush. Let me make that a little bit bigger. All right, and white as my foreground color. I can go ahead and Lowered that. Did it? Yeah, lowered it a little bit. There we go. Okay.
Mhm.
Before, after. Okay. And of course, if I need to, I can always uh, um, make my bird a little bit brighter. All right, so let me rename that bird. Okay. Make the bird a little bit brighter. There we go. Okay. And we didn't paint on the lower part of the wing. Okay. We did not.
Mhm.
But I can take, all right, here, hold on. Let me go Alt, click on the mask. That's my mask. You can see that the lower part of the wing has not been affected.
Mhm.
Okay. What I can do is I can take my brush and instead of putting 100% white, I can do something like a 50% white. Okay. So if I do 50% right up here, oh, my zoom's going off the screen. All right. I can take and paint on that. Okay. And it's only going to apply 50% of a mask. All right. Okay. So now we've brightened it a little bit, but we maintained the contrast of the rest of the bird. All right. Just by manipulating how we control our mask. All right. All right. Looking a little bit better, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I want to add a kiss of light on the rock on the right. Okay. We have a kiss of light on the rock behind the bird. I want to add a little kiss of light on the rock in front. So another curves adjustment layer. We're going to bring it up. All right. Invert it, Control I. Nice round, soft round brush. And we're just going to, oh, let's go back up to 100%. Okay. For the opacity, all right, you can use your number keys. The number 1 will give you 10% opacity, number 5, 50%, number 8, 80%, number 0, 100%. So you can very easily toggle 5, 50%, 0, 100%. Okay. We're going to go 100% and we're going to just paint the very top edge. All right. And if you overshoot it, all right, just letter X. All right. And we can hit just kind of like the tops of these rocks. And just, you know, be a little creative with how you paint it in. All right. And if you notice, it's a very subtle little hit of light. Okay. And if you find that's too much, we can just dial it down a little bit. Okay. And there's really not a lot of contrast in the rock, but we can also, let me just bring it up a lot just to show you this. We can do what we did previously, double click, brings up our layer style. Okay. We go to the underlying layer. And in this case, we want to preserve the shadow part. So we're going to bring the shadows in. All right. Split that, Alt or Option, split that. Okay. Hit OK. And we can now adjust it. And it looks a little bit better blended into the rock. Okay. All right. All right, so this will be, let me double click, rock, right. Okay. Oops, let me bring that down. And we want to get rid of this brightness here. Okay, one more levels adjustment. In this case, I want to bring my white point down because all the bright spots, I want to tell Photoshop I don't want those to be bright. We're going to bring it down, and anything below that is going to move appropriately. So we're going to take our point all the way to the right, and we're going to bring it down, okay, to right about there. All right, but here's where it gets a little bit different, okay? We've already established how we want our shadows to be in this area with the first layers adjustment, right? So I'm going to take my midtones and I'm going to bring my midtones back up just a little bit, okay? All right, so now we have less contrast. We've lowered everything, but we've also reduced the contrast. All right, we go back to our mask. We control or control option. We're going to take a nice soft round brush, make white our foreground color, and we're going to go ahead and paint in. Oh, a little less here, a little more on this 8, and I'm just going to hit those bright spots. Oh, went a little bit too far. Okay, and if that doesn't look too good, we can always bring it a little bit back up. All right, sometimes gray just does not look good. Okay, there we go. That looks a lot better. All right. All right, so that's the, we'll call that the log. Okay, and then the last thing I want to do is that specularity on the water down below. Okay, one more levels adjustment. We're going to bring our specularity down. Let's see, will that work? A little bit, yeah. And then we're going to grab the midtones. All right, bring that down. Control, Command I. And this one, now we can do this a couple ways. You can still do it with a brush if you want to do a brush. But in this case, what I want to do is I want to create a little bit of a gradient. Okay? So we have our gradient tool right here in our toolbox. We're going to click on that. And in the upper corner, you're going to see our gradient. If you select that, we're going to select foreground to transparent. Foreground to transparent. Okay. So it's going to pick whatever the foreground. Oh, cancel. Foreground to transparent. Okay. And it's going to pick up whatever color is here. All right. Which is white, which is what we want because we have a black background in our mask. All right. I'm just going to click, and it just like you're using a gradient filter in Lightroom, we're just going to click and drag up. If you hit the shift key, it's going to constrain it to that up and down. And we're going to go up to just where that shadow ends on our rock, because we want to just target the lower part. And if that's a little bit too much, we can come back and we can say, all right, we can bring the specularity back. Yeah, bringing the specularity back plays in, and we'll knock our highlights or midtones down. Okay, and that looks pretty good. All right, so before, after, before, after. Okay, and we'll call that water. All right, click and shift click on the last one, Control G to group it. There's our before, there's our after. Before, after. All right, any questions? And of course, you know, you can go all out with this if you want. You can get really nitty gritty with it. But levels adjustments, okay, being selective with your masking, all right, and I purposely kept the masking very, very simple for these examples, all right. Soft round brush, you paint directly on there and you're good to go. Oh, one trick I didn't show you. If you need to really see where you're painting, all right, and it's not quite obvious, all right, there's a couple of tricks. One, you can take your adjustment and like really do an extreme push, all right, to be able to paint. And then once you've got it, then you can bring it back down to its more respectable position. Okay. The other thing you can do, which I tend to kind of like a little bit better, is using the backslash key. The backslash key will create a overlay that allows you to kind of see where the mask is. All right. So everything that is red is masked out. Everything that is obviously the image is masked in. So make sure that you are on the mask itself. Remember, the little corners are highlighted. Okay. We can take our brush. Okay. White is our foreground color, so everywhere we paint, it's allowing that effect to come through. And you say, oops, I made a mistake. Well, here we can very clearly see it. All we got to do is letter X, and we can just go ahead and paint that mistake. All right, so here I can clean up this edge a little bit better. You know, here, maybe clean this edge up a little bit. All right. So this allows you to really be able to be a little bit more precise with your mask. Okay. All right. So that's the tip of the day. All right. Control 0 and then hit the backslash. It returns you back to normal. All right. Before, after. Okay. We covered a lot, but hopefully it demystified it and made it a little bit less scary. Okay. Now, if you've said, oh, there's no way I can do any of this, hopefully I've now proved you wrong, because levels adjustment, a brush, and a mask, and that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all I've done to this. All right. We got a little bit more technical with the blend if. All right. And you can see where the blend if really, you know, enhances your masking. All right. But just with the plain basic mask and levels adjustment, there's literally nothing you can't do. Okay. And I didn't go into the other things you can do with levels adjustments. You can make color adjustments. You know? Yeah, I'm not going to complicate it. But you can do color grading. You want your background a little bit warmer, a little bit dark, a little bit cooler, a little bit more red, a little bit more green. You can do that with your levels adjustments. Okay? Questions?
No, it is good. That's great.
For all you bird and nature and wildlife photographers, there's no reason why we can't see really phenomenal images from you from now on. Hint, hint. Nudge, nudge.
Guaranteed now.
Okay.
Very beautiful. Yeah.
So, and you saw the before image before it even brought it into Adobe Camera Raw. It was a very, right here. Let's, where's my Lightroom? Where's Lightroom? There we go. Very blah, very dark,
Wow.
underexposed, grossly underexposed image. I was shooting with my 400 millimeter lens. So that by itself already robs you of light. It was in deep shadow. You can see my ISO up here, right up here. Shooting at ISO 800. That was with my 6D, I think. Yeah, my 6D. So it doesn't have the greatest noise reduction, so I didn't really want to push it. But at 800 ISO, I was wide open for that lens, which is 5.6. And I was pushing 1/200th of a second. So it's relatively slow for that size lens. All right. So I couldn't slow it down and handhold it much more. So either I grab a bad shot or say, the hell with it, I'm not going to grab it. I opted to grab it. And you can see it's still very, very salvageable because I'm shooting raw. All right. I'm shooting raw. The data is there to manipulate. Okay. And we got a really, really good shot out of that. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for another fantastic Monday night class. I really hope that you enjoyed this. Next week is Q&A. If anybody has any specific, things that they need taken care of for that, and let me just stop sharing. If you got, something that requires a little bit more detailed answers, feel free to send me your questions ahead of time so that I can prepare a suitable answer for you. Otherwise, it's just flying by the seat of the pants. Okay. Also, don't forget, if anybody ever wants to come into the studio and do something for the Q&A, I'm also open for that. Okay.
Okay.
What? Almost forgot. Because I don't think Jesse from Milford Photo has posted it yet. A while back, I mentioned the my lecture on going beyond the rule of thirds. I'm going to be presenting that through Milford Photo in March 17th or whatever it is. Milford Photo will be advertising it. You got to sign up through their, Milford Photo's meetup group page.
Okay.
Meetup.com, Milford Photo. It's Wednesday. It's either a Wednesday or a Thursday. I think it's a Wednesday. It'll be the same time, 6:30. But it's my Going Beyond the Rule of Thirds lecture, which talks about not only the different compositional rules, but also a lot of the psychology of how people look at images and how we as photographers can utilize those that psychological rules to our benefit. And a lot of that went into how I edited these two images today. Okay, so having an understanding of those will help you in your editing as well. So anyway, I'll be advertising that once it goes live. I'm not sure if Jesse has published it yet, but anyway, I just wanted to
Is that
be aware.
6:30?
6:30 on
Wednesday in March.
Wednesday. Yeah.
On Wednesday.
Milford Photo's always at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, but he makes allowances for me. Where is
Zoom or?
it? Will be Zoom. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. It's a Zoom presentation.
Oh,
So,
nice.
So anyway, that's it. That's all the information I got for you. I'm glad I remembered that because I haven't even put it into my calendar yet. I literally just had a conversation with Jesse on Friday about it.
Oh.
So you guys are the first ones to know. See what happened? That's what happens when you show up to class. All right, guys. As always, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys supporting me. Those of you who are my Patreon members, I really, really, bottom of my heart, appreciate it. All right, guys, take care, and
Okay.
we'll see you next time.
Next time. Okay. Thank you, Doc.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.